Hey everyone, welcome to our training on composition and making visually pleasing images. Today we're covering basic composition techniques for food photography. I had a training earlier and I totally forgot to hit record. So I am running through this for you guys. Luckily, I had some slides put together and I have a good idea of all of the questions that were answered today. And I'm just going to provide you with a little bit of bonus information at the end as my deep, deep apology to all of you. But I know this will still be a great training for you, and you'll be able to glide through this anytime you want to work on making your images more visually pleasing so you can connect with more audience members. And I am excited about these composition techniques. Before we get started, there's a ton of information today. Each of these moving pieces that we're going to talk about, we could probably have multiple trainings on each one of them. But today I just wanted to get the basics down. Whether you've heard some of this before or it's new to you, I want you to make sure that if you want to write something down, you write it down. I want you guys to keep your inspiration boards handy so you can look back and try to take a peek at some of the composition styles that you're drawn to based on the photographs that you've selected in your inspiration boards. And I want you to keep in mind some things that you're already maybe doing intentionally or unintentionally with your own work. So let's get started. So spoiler alert, there's a method behind all of those beautiful photographs that you see on Instagram that you're like, oh my gosh, I want to take photos like that too. So all photos that look really great have a lot of thought, attention, and strategy behind them. One thing when I started out as a food photographer and just kind of started my blog, I would just put stuff places. I would take out all the really pretty things in my kitchen, all the tools that I had, and anything that looked really nice and was shiny and pretty, I would just throw it around my photography board and call it a day. But really good photos aren't about having like the biggest stack of pancakes with the most syrup dripping down, the most beautiful props, and the perfect equipment. What good photography is about photos that make sense. And those photos usually draw lines and they're able to tell a story. And what I mean by tell a story is through a photo, we can show our readers and our audience members exactly what we want them to see about one of like our recipes or an image that we're trying to convey, especially with product and food photography. The way we arrange the props on a board will show them maybe how something is made or the types of ingredients or how something is served or how it's like poured out of a blender or a coffee pot or something like that. So it's not really complicated. I used to get really hung up on that, like tell a story piece with your photo, but that's really all it is. It's just using a photo to show somebody the intention and the preparation and what something is that you're trying to display to them. So the things that we're going to talk about today that make a photo really, really great is number one, we're just going to touch on color scheme. I love talking about color. So I just think it's really important. So we're going to chat about that, texture, layers and shapes, storytelling elements, and lines. So first things first, we're going to go over colors. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have chatted before about color and color theory. I remember when I was in high school, I was in like a fashion design class, and my favorite part was color theory and ways that different colors make you feel. Sometimes like the cooler tones, they make you feel like really fresh or cool or relaxed. And the warmer tones, they evoke like, feelings of hominess and warmth and sometimes hunger with that red color. So obviously, like colors are colors that are kind of together, and contrasting colors are those that are across each other on the color wheel. And these can all make a really big difference in your food photography. So we're going to go to the next slide. I have a couple examples. Dana from Minimalist Baker, she has one of my favorite examples of different uses of color. So here, we're going to pull this up. And this is one of her photos that uses a lot of light colors. So here you see some oranges, some burnt oranges, like some deeper red tones here. We see some yellows and tans and then darker browns. So it's a lot of things that are super close to each other on that color wheel. I don't know about you guys, but this makes me feel like really invited and warm. It's happy. You're still able to see the pops because she's got those little highlights on the side and that lighter plate. But everything just feels like really like a big hug, like you just want to dive into that big sack for breakfast. This photo is another great example of like colors. Or actually, this looks like it's a video, but anyway, so you see like the pink blending into like the reddish orange tones with those nice like yellows. Everything is really, really close together on that color wheel. So it's like right here. All right, and then we move to some examples of contrasting colors. So this right here is a terrific example. We've got this bright blue background, and then we have this lighter tan cookie that super pops, and these dark chocolate colors look really rich because they just pop up against that contrasting color. So one more example, and then we'll talk about what I want you to do. All right, this is another example of some contrasting color. We've got those deep red tones with pops of green. And then what she's actually done is layer the like reds and oranges in a yellow bowl and then use another warm circular surface and then popped it all with that really, really pretty gray blue background. You see elements of red and green in the whole thing, which really just kind of lights your eye up, makes you on fire. It's super cozy in here, but then this just wakes everything up. So it's a really great usage of contrasting colors. So now what I want you to do is I want you, go through to your photography boards and I want you to, there we go, see what types of photos that you have pinned. I want you to see if a lot of stuff is maybe contrasting. You have a lot of different colors going on, or if everything is kind of like a one tone, one note. I think it's good to play around with both and to experiment. And some certain types and styles of foods work really well with one or the other, but it's just good to be cognizant of what your personal brand kind of moves towards. So textures and layers, that is the next portion. So things that add texture are boards with elements like raised material, wood, like feel, marble. I'm not sure what I was trying to type there. And things like natural materials. So anything with like texture. So a really popular boards with a lot of texture are like a marble slab or something like those, new plaster concrete boards. I think I shared a DIY tutorial if you want to make your own. Erickson surfaces or Woodville. You see a lot of stuff with like speckles and it looks like concrete or just different things that you would find out in nature. And those add some really great texture to your photo, which just adds another layer of dimension, which is more visually pleasing to the eye. Something that you can add that's really great also is a linen. Linens provide another layer of texture. You can use them to manipulate someone's eye for where you want them to draw it. You can use it to like draw a line in a photograph and cut something off, or to fill out some empty space, and it adds some texture and another layer because it's closer to your eye. Chopped chocolate, maybe a garnish like you saw in that last photo that we looked at by Minimalist Baker's page. So she had a lot of, there looked like there was some cilantro and some sliced tomatoes and different things like that. And it added a lot of texture and different layers on top of the photography board and the wood board, which brought you even closer to your eye, and then on top of the bowls. So like she did in that photo, you can layer like textured items and shapes. So one thing I like to do is stick with similar shapes in a photo as well. So as you saw, maybe we should go back to this photo again. But you saw there are a lot of circular shapes here. So this is a circular bowl. We've got some circular tomatoes, kind of some circles over here, circle chickpeas, and then everything is centered on this circular board. We've got another circle down here. One thing that's really great to do as well, if you have something that's very square, maybe you've got like brownies in a pan. So you've got your board, maybe you put a baking sheet down, and then you can even put the square baking pan inside the baking sheet. So you have several layers of the same shape, which is very interesting for the eye. It's really, really great to add some structure to a photo, and it makes it really pretty. So I pulled up one of my photos that I recently took to talk about texture and some layers here. So as you can see, this photo has a ton of texture and a lot of different layers. This is really focused in right here, and we've got a layer of some green stuff, cilantro, some cheese, another layer. Then we've got the chili. We've got some texture from the linen over here because I wasn't loving the photo with white space. A bunch of chopped chocolate adds a lot of texture and it's just a different element on top of my marble board. This is a really soft marble, but you can still see some of the element there. We've got some more cilantro, and then this antler adds a lot of texture, and it kind of shows you what the photo is about. So lots of textural elements. I've got a circle here on top of actually a circular plate, which I have kind of peeking out on the side just to mimic those circular elements. This is kind of like a circular arc. So I just try to stick with the same thing going on there. So kind of putting these things together, I like to call them storytelling elements. So these things here, all of our textual items and the things that we add to our subject are storytelling items because they make someone's eye move strategically from another, just each different part of a photo, and they tell the story of how you want a photo to be perceived. It gives clues what's in a dish from like a hero image or the image that you select as like the featured image for your post or your Instagram. And you can use things that super reflect your style too. So my style here, my style tends to be like really homey and earthy. So I use like really warm tones, and I always stick with like tan or warmer linens. I've got this antler here because this is some venison chili. So it's telling that story of what I've got going on in this dish. There's also some chocolate in there. So it's like a adobo chili situation, and there's a bunch of chocolate. So I added some chopped chocolate, and I have it all displayed in a way that's super strategic. We're going to go over how I placed everything next, but I put all these storytelling items out to show people what I want them to make. I want them to make this venison chocolate chili, and these are all the things that's in it, and it's super easy to tell what this dish is because of the storytelling elements that I added. So if they were to look at this photo, they could probably tell that it's some sort of venison dish with chocolate in it. So some great things that you can do, you know, maybe you add little bits, something that I really like to do, especially for like prep photos, like maybe if I'm baking something, I like to lay some eggshells out as another element to add some texture. And maybe you want to put out some like milk or some spices, and it just tells a story of what's in a dish or the way that you are presenting it. Another great thing to do for storytelling elements is to add movement. So maybe if you're shooting like a cappuccino and you're pouring it out of, maybe a little pitcher that you use to froth the milk. By implying movement and making somebody's eye move up and down the pour shot, you're kind of showing them how the cappuccino that you're making has been prepared. So that's a really, really great way to just kind of add some storytelling elements and to control what people are thinking about the things that you are putting on display. So the last thing that we're going to go over is lines. So you use your storytelling elements, the shapes and the textures, and the actual subject placement to create lines or a flow for someone to view photos. This is the thing that has made the most difference for me with my composition. The best way that I can explain it is you place things as they make sense. Things aren't just randomly strewn about a photo. There's some way that you're trying to pull someone's eye by making lines. They don't really know it unless they have, experience in photography, but they don't really know, but you are putting things in a specific place for a specific reason to create lines across a photo so that they are looking at a photo a certain way. And this is actually what makes something visually pleasing. This is what makes you like something. This is what makes you say, oh my gosh, that's a beautiful photo. Everything is strategically placed so it draws lines. So here's what I did here. So what I did first was I placed down this plate, and then I put my chili on top. I started then with this larger element. I put this antler down. I used my cilantro down here, and you'll see that the cilantro leaves are pointing to certain places. So I've got one pointing this way, one pointing this way. This one also points up to the same place at cheese. So if you start here, the eye kind of is drawn from the bottom of the photo, from this piece of cilantro to this piece of cilantro. Then on to the bottom of the cheese, and this kind of pulls you up. The cilantro here helps. It goes right to the antler, which draws you around to this little chocolate cluster over here. The eye kind of bounces around up there, then ultimately it is driven down to the line of this linen here, and it just kind of keeps circling around. It's visually pleasing. I think just looking at it, there are ways that I could improve this. I was talking in the training today, I am not a perfectionist. So this definitely hinders my ability to just like nitpick. I am kind of a getter-doner, which is good in sometimes, but other times I probably could have fluffed with this a little bit more and fine-tuned it. And that's one thing, it's really good not to be overly critical with your work, but one way that I've improved is I've looked at images that I really love, and then I compare it to my work, and I really look at like the precise technical, ways that sometimes photographers that I really admire arrange their photos. Like Sarah Fennell with Broma Bakery, she obviously does a lot with food photography training, but if you just look at her photos and how precise the placements are, and you can really, really see where she's drawing those lines and where she's trying to take you with those photos, she's a great one to study for just preciseness. Even if her photography style is not something that appeals to you, it's really great to look at for just really well composed, good photography. So that's kind of how you draw lines. That's something that I want you guys to start practicing. When you see a photo that you really like, spend a minute or so just looking at it and see where your eye wants to start, and then see where it's drawn to and where it wants to go. It's going to take you a little bit to get this down. This is definitely something that took me by surprise when I learned about it about a year ago, but I would say like 6 months in, I really started to feel confident, and now it's something that I do with almost every single photo, and it really helps me to improve as a photographer. So how I want you to start setting up your photo shoots now that you know a little bit more about composition or you feel refreshed, I want you to stage your photos first. So instead of adding your like chili in here, and this is really great, especially when you're setting up something like maybe a cocktail or like a cappuccino that has froth and can only be shot for a certain amount of time, or you want steam or a certain element where you need something that is, ready, that you shoot just after it's ready. So I want you to stage it first. So add in some of those larger elements like the vehicle or the vessel that your food or your drink is going to be in. Add that in first. Then you add your elements to create the lines and draw the eye. So one thing that we're going to look at next is how you can play with your aperture to like kind of pinpoint your style and get the desired look. Then you can add your subject and make those small tweaks to make those lines really crisp and to make your photo really make sense. But it's going to cut down on the time that you actually spend shooting. I know a really common complaint is that people just feel like they're wasting so much time shooting. It's taking them a crazy amount of time to get a photo shoot done, and they have several to do in a day, and they might only have a Saturday to do it, and it's taking up a lot of time. So by going into it with intention, and something I also like to do is maybe if you're shooting like a strawberry smoothie, maybe Google a couple images of a strawberry smoothie and see how ones that you really like are set up, and try to mimic that composition by putting things in a really strategic way. Now that you know that it's not just stuff placed around, you can kind of mimic it and then create your own lines and your own spin. Then you'll add in your subject, make those small tweaks, and you'll get a really beautiful image. One thing that we were talking about in the training today was maybe if this is something you really struggle with, you could try to learn to shoot tethered. Now, shooting tethered isn't something that I like to do, but that I do myself. Not that it's not something that I like to do. I just don't do it myself. But what it allows you to do is hook up your camera to your computer so you see what you're shooting really largely in a computer screen. So that's really great because you can see everything blown up in a bigger picture. Sometimes you might not notice in your camera some small things like that just maybe aren't working. And if you shoot tethered, you might be able to see it, catch it right away, make the small adjustment, and then execute your photo shoot really, really swiftly. So that's how I want you to approach your next photo shoot. And next Wednesday, January, oh boy, what is that? 23rd, potentially? I'll have to check that date. I am going to be posting a big thread in the group where I want you guys to share your recent composition photo shoot, the compositioning of recent photo shoots after going through this training. So we can look at them and we can make adjustments. And yeah. So another question that came up was after looking at all of these composition techniques. And so we're talking about aperture or depth of field. Is it okay for some photos to have more depth of field and others to not? And so for others to have more area of the photo in focus than others. So I think that is definitely okay. One thing that I like to do is, as I've mentioned, I use a lot of the same colors in my photos. So we're going to go over these two photos of mine. This is chicken tortilla soup. This is just an apple galette. But one thing that you'll notice with almost every single one of my photos is it has like a really warm element. Maybe it's like a burnt orange or, basically like a burnt orange, like this color here, in the middle there, kind of back here, that darker, or in here, that element there. Most of my photos have that. And I just try to mimic a lot of things in my photos so that when I want to change the depth of field and do like a little bit different of a stylistic change, you'll still know that it's by the same photographer. But the difference here, and I'll just tell you what I was going for composition-wise. I wanted to go for something really monochromatic with this photo shoot. I just really like the look of the like beige ice cream with the kind of burnt orange and brown galette with the rich warm tones back here, the handle of my ice cream scooper. We do have some like silvers here in the metal with the ice cream scooper, but everything is pretty much generally very warm and white. The way I styled this photo, I had the galette kind of pointing right here at this intersection in my ice cream scooper, which then draws your eye up towards the galette. It kind of gets lost here in all this like melty, gooey bite. I wanted to create some movement to show people how this was supposed to be consumed. So I did kind of a slice bite shot there. And then the fork kind of moves everything back around. This little apple piece is pointing right back into that center where the focus is on this photo. So you can see that ooey gooey middle. I used a lot of circular elements here as well. So I have a circular ice cream scoop. The ice cream scooper is also circular. The galette is circular, and as is a plate. So a lot of like shapes. And I've got some texture with just the ice cream and the meltiness and that parchment. Don't absolutely love the placement of that parchment there. That would be something that I could probably work on, but it's still some texture that's added. I've got some melted ice cream back here that you can't really see. But the storytelling with this is that this is a really inviting and warm, just kind of ooey gooey treat. Everything's kind of melting all over the place. It's really like inviting and warm and cozy. And I hope it makes people just want to make that. So with this guy, so I went with more contrasting colors. It's not as monochromatic. So you see I've got the reds here, some yellows, a bunch of pops of green that really highlight what's going on with that like tortilla soup situation with this like sour cream melting in. I've got texture from the marble and the chips. I've got those limes. I've got plenty and plenty of texture in the soup bowls, which is great. And they're a little bit raised from all the other textural elements. Again, I'm going at it with the circular shapes here, 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 here. These are kind of like a half circle situation. And so our lines, you're kind of drawn from this lime to the center here. It's drawn back. You sweep around through the chippies. You come through and, you know, you're stuck in the middle here. And then the lines of the chicken kind of draw you around, or it might shoot you back over here, but it was definitely some intentional placement on my part. Those are two different photos. There is a lot less depth of field. A lot more of the photo is in focus than this one, but it still kind of, to me, looks like it is shot by the same photographer, and that is just like a way that you can play around with different looks. I personally like bumping up my aperture on overhead shots and shots like this that are straight on. I like to bump it down a little bit with a little bit of depth of field. I think that's a really fun way to play with it. It's just me, again, personal preference. This is a word I'm looking for. But yeah, so those are just two examples. So today in the training, we went over two of our awesome members from Shift2You. Sarah and Ellie were kind enough to share their photos. What I have here is one of Sarah's photos that's gorgeous, and it is like a baked oatmeal situation here. What I went ahead and did is she did an awesome job with moving the eye around the photo, and I just wanted to highlight what she did here. It just kind of starts down here with the blueberries, moves up to the oats, goes through this first little mason jar, and then my eye is kind of taken with this blueberry, maybe to this guy, maybe brought back down here, starts all over again, moves all the way up through. You can just see how everything really easily sweeps. I did mention that a really, really great idea is to turn the grid on in your camera. You can just like Google your camera model number and just find out how to turn the grid on, or you can look in your manual. But it's a pretty simple thing to do. And then you put your grid on, and it really helps to see how a photo is balanced. So one thing that really helps composition wise, and I know the rule of thirds is a really hard concept to grasp. So one way that I really just try to get around that in a more basic sense is to make sure if my subject matter, the focal point of my photo is not in the center, I try to make sure it's in one of these intersections. I just find that for me, it makes a really well-balanced photo. So none of these are really, the focal point isn't in the center here. I'm really focused on this guy. So I mentioned maybe moving at just a little bit up so it's in this intersection. Then you can kind of balance out these other two and just kind of tweak your storytelling elements to just balance out that photo. I think Sarah did a really great job by leaving some empty space here. And then it's balanced out here with these oats. Another great thing was maybe to point this handle towards this little mason jar back here. I think these add a lot of balance, and I like that she's got a ton of circular elements here. Almost everything is circular. Circle, 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 all the blueberries, and her measuring cup. Then we have got Ellie's photo here, and she did a beautiful job of composing as well. So we've got some garlic that points our eye right to this piece of cilantro. You're shot up through that spoon. You get lost in this like ooey gooey sauce. You're brought back up here. Then you come around. The lines from the lime draw you down. So your eye just sweeps really well. It's a very well balanced photo. One thing I noticed when I was looking at Ellie's Pinterest board, her mood board, is that the whites are a little bit more towards the warmer side than she has here. So I encouraged her to play around with her white balance and then her tones and tints and just like the temperature of the all around photo in Lightroom, just to make it a little bit brighter, and then just to actually brighten up those whites a little bit, and the highlights even a little bit too. But her highlights look really good in here. But that's one thing that I noticed with her style. So this is another one by Ellie, and I also think this is just a great representation of a beautifully composed photo. She's kind of got this cilantro and it sleeps around, comes up here. The cilantro here points to the jalapenos. The avocados kind of pointing at each other. This balances out the photo. And then she's got this nice little bit of space. So I thought that was really awesome. One thing I want to go back and do as well is we will look at Ellie and then Sarah's Pinterest boards so you guys can kind of see how they are transitioning towards really exemplifying what their mood boards are showing. So this is Ellie's mood board. As you can see here, these are her photos. This one and that one. They look a lot like these photos here. So she's got a lot of greens. It looks like the whites, like I was saying, she might want to pop up that white background a little bit, but she's really spot on. She was saying she was having trouble with the 45-degree angle, but I noticed that a lot of the photos here were either shot overhead or straight on. So I encouraged her that if she should definitely work on her 45-degree angle as an angle that she's shooting, but maybe focus that on like maybe a process shot or just another image and work on an overhead or a straight on image for her hero image or the image that's like featured or that gets put on her Instagram page or her Facebook page or wherever she is promoting her content. Just because I think it's a really great way to practice and to nail down her brand vibe. So Sarah's, you remember Sarah's beautiful oatmeal or oat bake. She's got a ton of great resources in here too. So it looks like she's got some really, really warm feels, very homey, very inviting. Her style is super simplistic, actually. It looks like she likes a lot of implied movement, like we've got some slices here, a pour shot there. There's a bite out of this here. She likes a lot of circular elements, but very, very simple. So I encouraged her to take a peek at Rachel with Two Love Studios work because her style is very, she calls it food portrait style. So it really heavily, heavily focuses on really, really great photography of the actual subject of the photo or your main focus of the photo. So that's a really, really great tool there. We were also chatting today about favorite places to get food props. There were mentions of like World Market. My personal favorites are like Antique and Thrifting. And I also love things from Target and Anthropologie. One thing that I've noticed too is flatware that is dull. This actually does not have as much shine as it looks or as many highlights as it looks in this photo. If you have like really, really shiny flatware, it might not look as good as something that is matte. So we will start a thread as well to chat about our favorite places to get props. As a little bonus item, I am still happy to, if you miss this training, and since I didn't record it, as a bonus item, if you want to message me your Pinterest board and a photo of your choosing, I will personally go over it with you. We can talk about it in the group if we'd like, but if you want to message me and we can do a little chat about the vibe that you're going with a photo like I did with Sarah and Ellie's, please feel free. I apologize for missing that record button again, but I think this has everything that we chatted about today. And in February, you can be looking out for a thread. We are going to be focusing on a behind the scenes. I'm going to take you guys behind the scenes on a photo shoot. So I'm going to show you how I set everything up for the day, how I execute a photo. So we're going to be going through everything like my manual settings, how I style and set up my photos, and just kind of those styling elements. And it's just going to be a full behind the scenes. Before we do that, I'm going to encourage everyone to post their behind the scenes setup, and we'll talk about it in ways that we can better utilize as our own spaces. So I'm excited about that. Thanks for being here for this training, and I'll catch you next time.